All right, so I just wanted to give an overview slash review of my Growatt inverter here. My whole system I'll describe. You can't see it outside. It's pretty basic. I just have six 315 watt panels. They're made by Q-Cell. I got them from a local supplier. They're monocrystalline. So total output, theoretical is 1890 watts. I've got one of those Eco combiner boxes. 6-string combiner, Ecoworthy, I think is the brand on Amazon. It was way too expensive it was the DC breakers are more than, the best I could find was about $150. So what I got, it actually combines the strings. I'll leave a link in the description. It's not really that, I don't need to discuss it that much. In any case, so inside I have the Growatt 3000 watt inverter. It's 48 volts. It's a solar MPPT charge controller. It's also an inverter, like I said, 3,000 watts, and a battery charger. So it'll do, basically it's a solar system in one box. It's pretty nifty. What you normally fill with 3 devices is now filled with one, at least when it comes to this off-grid sort of system. So the Growatt inverter. And then if you look down here, if you ignore the UPS on top that's running my network, I have 2 of the 24-volt battery banks. They're lithium ion, and they're reconditioned from bigbattery.com. I don't believe they have any more in stock, at least when I checked last. But they're a really good bang for the buck. Again, they're 3,000 watt hour, guaranteed by them. I haven't tested them, but you're going to at least get that, probably more. Each is 24 volts, so obviously in series is a 24-volt system. They come with these power pole connectors, so you have to make this cable, which is pretty easy, although you're going to want like a hydraulic crimp tool for these. That was kind of a pain in the butt. This is running over here to the block, the fuse block. And then the system here, you can see, has an output or the AC in or the AC output to charge this. It can charge up to 3,000 watts from this single cable. I have it just set up as this. Eventually, I intend to get a second one of these inverters. They can be wired in you can wire them together. You can piggyback them or create a string of them to create 240 volts. So this is only putting out 120 volts now on its own. It's putting out a single 120 line, or leg, excuse me. A second one would provide a second 120 leg, and then you would connect them with one of these cables here, which come with it. I'll show you a better picture. So you've got a couple cables here that come with it by default. You don't need those yet unless you're running a second inverter with it. So right now, just 120 volts, 3,000 watts, with getting 1,890 watts from the solar panels. It also has a utility charger. So what this is it provides AC input for the device for the inverter, and it's just plugged there. So when you're not providing enough solar, when the solar isn't enough to run this load, it will use utility power to do it as well. Additionally, if you don't have solar power to charge your batteries, it will also charge your batteries via the utility power. Pretty nifty unit. I imagine you could. I'm not suggesting this, but in a similar fashion to a generator backfeed, you could do that with this system. You would obviously need the proper breakers and stuff, but I may do that eventually to just feed my panel back. I currently have a generator backfeed for my panel. It'd be nice to have the just flip a switch and have this power my panel as well when the power's down. So moving on. The setup is pretty straightforward. I'll just go through some of these screens or this information that it shows you. So, wrong one. Let's see, here we go, down. So right now, I'm not going to describe each one of them to you. My solar input is 100 volts. So my system outside is putting out 100 volts, which is about what I expect. and it's providing 5 amps to the battery. I believe that it'll provide, I think what I found was around 19 amps total. Yeah, so it'll provide around 100 volts at 19 amps when it's full sun. Yeah, you can see it's the wattage is 414 watts. So it's early in the day. It's about, what time is it here? Well, it's about 10:30, I think, here in Virginia. 10:30 in the morning in Virginia. And the month, what is this? May, middle of May. So about right. There's a whole bunch of information it'll show you up here. It'll basically give you any sort of combination of info that you want on the screen. I'll go into the menu here. One of the settings I found to be kind of a bear that I turned off was this power saving mode. They call it, it's labeled as SDS, and yeah, it's called power saving mode. It did some screwy things where I couldn't get it to put output to this consistently. So I just turned that off. I think that what that does is it turns the screen off. This can be kind of power hungry when it's running by itself, or it's just this device running. So it's got a large power draw by just being on with the fan. You can probably hear that fan in the background and the screen running. One of the other settings I did, I changed. I went to user. I set the battery to user defined, so I could change the charging profile. So here in setting 5, it's set as user defined. There are 3 choices. There are user defined, flooded. These are the battery choices. So I set the battery type to user defined. Flooded there, obviously you know what a flooded battery is. AGM battery, their lithium battery. They want you to use this setting if you're using, or the best of my knowledge here, that if you're using one of their own lithium ion batteries. I guess it has a BMS in this system for that. Any lithium, you're going to need a BMS. It can't interface with other batteries as a BMS, so any battery you have needs to have a BMS of its own. Mine do, which is why I have user defined. I believe you could probably get away with the AGM setting or something. You'd have to look at more in depth about what profile it uses, but I just set user defined, and that gives me access to a few settings later on. So they'll go to number 19. So this here is the bulk charging voltage. So that's what its target is, 56.4 volts before I believe it stops charging the batteries. And then the floating charging voltage is 54 volts, excuse me. What's important here that I wanted to use was the DC cutoff, which I set as 42 volts. So on a 24 volt system, it'd be, what is that, 20, I think the way I got here was, on a 24 volt system, it'd be 21. So on this, it's 42 volts, because it's 48 volts. So yeah, that's set there. Most of the other settings are self-explanatory. The documentation is really good. You can get it on the, I think the person I bought it from on eBay has the download link. You can also find it on Will Prowse's DIY Solar. I'll leave the link to the eBay. They're in short supply right now with this quarantine pandemic thing going on. I think people are buying them. So it's a great system so far. It's not giving me any issues. It's been running rock solid now for at least 3 weeks. There was, again, the growing pains with the power saving mode that kind of screwed things up early on. That made it a bear, but once I figured that out, it's fine. So again, just to reiterate, if you're going to use that power saving mode, you might want to do some tinkering. Don't expect it to go so smoothly. The Growatt 3000 watt 48 volt inverter, battery charger, and solar charge controller.